Welcome to Coffee on the Couch. Coffee on the Couch. Hello, Couchside Coffee. I'm super excited for this guest, the man, the myth, the legend of PJ's Coffee. He is our roast master. He resides, I'm going to say you live there, Felton, because you probably do in the roaster facility. He is the mastermind of all of our coffee creations in our small batch roasted coffee. So I can't wait to dive in and give our customers the lowdown on how awesome PJ's Coffee is because of you and everyone else down there. So let's get to it. So first things first, we always talk about what we're drinking. So what are you sipping on, Felton Jones?
So I am sipping on my current favorite. It's been my favorite now for a little while now. It's our medium roasted Columbia Supremo, and it's been absolutely phenomenal. So yeah,
That's a top seller in
yeah,
St. Louis too.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know what people really love though, which is
What's
interesting to me because I have them try it. So if they come into our store, I have them taste test because I feel like our roast 35 is one of the smoothest roasts, just personally. And
Mhm.
people who only want like blonde roasts
Yeah.
end up loving the roast 35, even though it's a dark roast.
So can I give you that explanation?
100%. Please do.
All right, so our friends over with the green logo, they have a tendency to roast very dark. There's a couple of reasons from a coffee perspective that I understand why they do. One being consistency, um, and then the other thing being that when you go dark on your roast profiles, what you create is you create sort of a level of ease in order to be able to be consistent. Um, and then also it gives you a little bit of leeway on your bean selection. And so when you're as big as some people can be, then that's obviously something very, very important. I guess what you could do is you could think of them as sort of like Jack Daniels, but think of us as sort of like single barrel Jack Daniels.
Okay.
So
I gotcha.
so when they say a blonde, what that's technically meaning is just a lighter roast, but it's a lighter roast from their roast profile, which really kind of puts them in the category of sort of our dark roast slash full city. So those customers that you're experiencing, what they're getting is they're getting that peel back of the intensity, but just enough of that boldness is in there, where our medium roast may be, a little bit too light for them,
Oh,
but that
I
roast
love
is
it.
probably perfect for 'em.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that explanation.
Yep,
Do
that's
you want
cool.
to
No, I
do you want to
love
know what I'm drinking?
what. Yes, I do want to know. Let's see. Let me ask. Does it have any whipped cream in it? Does it have any flavoring in it?
No flavor, but
No.
it does have sweet cold foam on top.
So you're drinking some cold brew.
No. Well, shaken espresso cold brew.
Okay. All right.
I love our cold dripped espresso. It is
Yeah.
my fave. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I love it.
I had that we get so caught up in terminology in the coffee world. It's like it's how cool can you make your beverage sound when you're ordering it at the counter. That is the reason why I always say hats off to the baristas because they are so underappreciated. People don't understand. They have to learn how to speak a completely different language.
And then on top of that, and then everyone like hyphenates the words, like
Absolutely.
half
Yeah.
cap whip,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
So,
it's all about the cool thing. And then
mhm.
now that barista is on the spot to make that drink exactly the way that the person wants it. So, yeah, hats off to those guys. But yeah, terminology in coffee is so, you know, particular that there for a little while there's a struggle with considering a shaken espresso, but using cold brew. It's like, yeah, I mean, listen, it's just a play on words, guys. It's what matters is what's in here, and are you enjoying it? Yeah, absolutely. So,
Right? Does it put a smile on your face?
see, exactly, exactly. So,
Okay, let's get down to the gritty. I have lots of questions for you.
okay, go for it.
So you are your picture is on the wall, I think, of every PJ store. So how are you so important? Why are you so important? And then how, just tell us about your journey a little bit.
Yeah, so it's interesting. How did that come to be? I think it probably has a lot to do with my connection to our beloved founder. You know, the lady that bears those initials, PJ. So Phyllis Jordan, um, she was the owner of the company when I started with the company, and she was just always just this tremendous person. What I always admired about her was that she didn't own the company and just kind of like sit in some executive office as the owner and had, people around her doing the work. She was very, very entrenched in it. So she understood coffee. She knew how to roast coffee. She understood, flavor profiles and blending coffee and that sort of thing. So I think that that's what we all, as PJ's, descendants, let's call us, have to be thankful for is that, our founder was actually a true coffee pioneer. And I don't know if you know this or not, but she was the first female president of the Specialty Coffee Association.
That's awesome.
And
I love a
yeah,
strong female.
so she is absolutely recognizing. You know what? When I go to these conferences and I'm representing PJs, people want to come up to me and talk to me about Phyllis. So it's awesome. But fast forward, she's the reason that I had the opportunities to really grow and expand within our operation. And something that I learned from her, I guess I was learning it at the time, Jamie, but I didn't really know I was learning it. And then later on during my career, as I was in Phyllis's shoes and I start to like identify talent, or evaluate people and, what coffee means to them and what they might mean to our organization going forward, it really became a thing where I realized that you have to see something in an individual and then you can really start to feed that. And then that can, kind of grow and flourish into something great. If that person doesn't have it, you can't force it. Like I can't go out and make someone become the next great coffee professional. It is a passion oriented, passion driven, industry. And so she saw that in me, and I guess that's the reason why she was, really just kind of like downloading into me with it. And over the years, I mean, it took patience, and I enjoyed the company, I enjoyed the customers. Being in New Orleans, I think really helped because when you walk around and you're representing PJs, people notice it, they pay attention, and they say, first thing I get, most common question I get, which one do you work for?
All of them.
Yeah. And so when I do that, it's kind of like, oh, so you're at corporate, and then here comes the Phyllis stories. They want you to know how they're connected with Phyllis or how they knew Phyllis. So it really was always something for me to be proud of in terms of the brand, but at the same time, I really got entrenched in coffee itself, and I'm sure that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. But just coffee by itself is such a powerful and very I don't know, very interesting, industry. You know,
It is. Yeah. Were you like born and raised in New Orleans?
I was, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So it's just in your blood.
The funny thing is, my brother was in the military. He was stationed in Germany, and I think I might have been about maybe 7 years old. But I remembered that my mom and dad would go to PJ's and buy a bunch of coffee and tea when they would send him his care packages.
Oh, that's awesome.
So fast forward, when I got a job with PJ's, I guess I must have been about maybe 21, 22 years old. And I was the delivery driver, and I stepped into the PJ's on Magazine Street, and I stopped, and I said, I remember those stairs. It was my first time entering that place since the last time I had entered it, which was about 7 or 8 years old. And I just remembered, I was like, wait a second. I remember coming into this place as a kid. Now I work for the company. Yeah,
Full circle.
full circle.
That's
Yeah,
so cool.
yeah.
Can
So
you Can you explain like your typical day? So what does a roast master do? Kind of give our audience that
Well,
breakdown.
so my wife thinks that I'm crazy sometimes because one of the things that I do for the company is I do all of the coffee contracting, futures purchases. So I deal with the New York Board of Trade, securing contracts for us to lock in pricing and that sort of thing. The coffee market starts trading at 3:30 a.m. Central Time.
Oh my goodness.
So I don't have an obligation to be ready set in front of my computer at that time. But if I do turn over during the night and I look at the clock and it's after 3:30, I kind of have a hard time resisting picking up my phone to see how the market is trading. Just get an idea of what my day is going to be like. Uh, So a typical day for me, I kind of have a twofold kind of day. One day, if I'm going to be very focused internally within our manufacturing facility, that's a day that'll start out, answer a few emails, kind of get myself, going, 2 cups of coffee to start out the day, and then, on my feet, moving around the facility, working with the individuals in the facility, that's what happened to me, and that's what I like to do. I like to really walk in the shoes of the people who are, they're helping me to look good. They're doing, the things behind the scenes that most people don't know that go on. So I really want to support those guys. So, and you know what? I really enjoy those days more than I do the days where you're behind the desk and you're pulling your hair out of your head because you feel so much productive, and you probably have that same thing when you can get on the line next to the barista.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
you're interacting, right? Like
exactly,
this is
exactly.
why I have a coffee shop. And so
Yep,
I like seeing my customers and
yep,
my
yep.
baristas. Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But these days and times have really been some interesting times in terms of coffee and the coffee market and the coffee industry. So I am spending a lot of time working the phones, having meetings with people, talking about our coffee supply chain, where are our containers, ship dates, arrival dates. I'm getting inundated with samples of coffee more than I ever have in my career, and I'm 30 years in now, and it's like this is really a trying time for the coffee industry, and we all as coffee individuals within our industry, we're banding together like I've never seen before, really to just kind of help each other sort of understand what we're experiencing and what it may take for us to work through it and that sort of thing. So it's been, it's been interesting. It's been
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, just so you know, like the franchisees appreciate what you're doing, right? So
Appreciate that.
we think that we think we're thankful for you a lot. That's something I couldn't navigate.
Yeah,
Obviously, it's something that's on all of our minds as well, right? So
yeah,
we have we have soul into this company and we want to see it succeed as well. So thank you for being on that front line and dealing with all
it's
of that.
not, it's not such a cliche thing to say that, it's you all that really make it purposeful for me. It's like when I get to meet individuals like yourself and we get to interacting and things of that nature, it's like it's really a great connection. And then, as you know, we want to get this tour planned for me to come
Yes.
out to Missouri and whatnot. Those tours that I've done so far have been phenomenal because there's aspects of it that really I never even considered. So the interaction with customers, interaction with yourself as the franchisee, interaction with the baristas, it's kind of like being there and being an information source. It's like so satisfying, and it's like therapeutic, for me almost.
Yeah, because it puts a face to the name, right? So my baristas, they learn about Felton Jones, they learn about Phyllis Jordan.
Yeah,
I want them to meet you so they don't think I'm some like crazy fanatic, but like it makes a difference. Like
yeah, it
this is
does.
who we are.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
where we came from. So I'm very excited for that tour whenever it happens. But
yeah.
I mean, we will be here. We're gonna
Yeah,
put on a show.
I'm
So
coming. I'm coming. And that's our opening day, so my goal is to get there, and I want to experience some Major League Baseball when I get there.
yes, yeah. Oh, we have season tickets, so you
Mm,
just let us know.
awesome.
We'll get you in there. The biggest question I think you can answer is what sets PJ's Coffee apart from their roasting versus other coffees. There's, I mean, a million different. You can go to, Schnucks, Deerbergs, those are our local groceries, and find a gazillion coffees. But what sets PJ's apart?
So, it's gonna sound strange when I say that, but I'm gonna say you do. And what I
That's
mean by
nice of
that
you.
is, when you go to the grocery store and you see all of these coffees on the shelf at the grocery store, yeah, I mean that's the thing that comes to mind. Other than the name on the bag of the company or the type of coffee or where the coffee came from, like truly, what are the differences there? What I would say the difference is for PJs at the top of the list is freshness. Um, so I think that the fact that we're vertically integrated, where, listen, you're talking to the roast master, so you're talking to the person that's responsible for our roasting, and everything that we put into that, it would really be it would be a waste if we didn't really have a care or concern about how long it took it to get into your hands. Because no matter what, freshness always matters the most. Um, one of the things I always say is if I made you two different cups of coffee, and one of the cups of coffee is a cup of coffee made from a real high end bean that was, some time ago, it's like some old stale coffee. And then I gave you a cup of coffee that was very, very fresh, but it was from some mediocre bean. That mediocre bean is probably going to stand out to you more than the really expensive one did, and it's because of the freshness factor. So that would be number one. Number two, I think that it is true when I say you're the difference, is that when people walk into your place, I can guarantee you have interactions with customers that they appreciate that go beyond just writing somebody's name on a cup and yelling out their name when their order is ready. When the baristas start identifying people, I was in Crowley, Louisiana 2 weeks ago, and I was interacting with customers and the baristas and all, and so I'm hearing all of these different stories. So when I'm talking to baristas, I said, okay, so you guys have to give me an example of what you deal with, because I know that as I go out to these stores, the baristas, they may not know everybody's name, but they know them by what they order, or and so we were having a fun old time talking about the blueberry muffin lady, because they don't know the lady by name. They just know she comes in every day and buys a blueberry muffin. And to me, that's the difference. I think that experience when you walk into a PJ's, it makes what's in that cup taste that much better. Like it's the difference maker. And so I'd like to dial into the nuances of the coffee and all of that sort of stuff, but it really is those little tidbits. I'm especially proud of this Columbia because I went to Columbia last year, and the Columbia coffee that you are serving at your cafe is coffee that I went there specifically with the focus to just kind of zone in on a flavor profile that we wanted to represent us. And I think I might have done a pretty decent job.
You think? No, it's awesome. All of it is
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
All of it is
And some
awesome.
of those things are things that maybe the customers will really never know the details behind. But you know what? It matters to us, and that's all that matters. So
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Okay, we're got so many questions, but you're like segueing nicely into them. Can you tell us? We talked briefly about roasting and the difference between PJs and other brands. What exactly happens during the roasting process? I
yeah,
know you could probably go on for hours,
yeah.
but
We'll
if you
keep
can just,
it.
yeah, if you can just get like, explain it like to my kindergartner,
Yeah,
to my
yeah.
third grader.
No, you know what is interesting? When I've had like field trips of everybody from, you know, uh, young school kids to Girl Scouts to senior citizens come through for tours, the most intriguing questions come from the really, really young kids. So, yeah,
They're
got
so
a little
smart.
student there.
Yeah.
Um, so basically, and this is terminology that may be beyond what people know about, but when we receive the coffee, we receive it in the format that we call green coffee. And green coffee means that it's the raw, unroasted coffee bean, and it is green, in color, and so that's where it gets its name. Well, it's pretty hard, it's pretty solid. It looks like a coffee bean, it's just green. So during the roasting process, what's happening is in the beginning phases of the process, we're cooking the moisture out of that bean. And then after that moisture is drawn out of the bean, now the bean will start to expand and it will turn from a green to a yellow, and then it'll go through different shades of brown. And then there's something else that goes on during the roasting process called the crack. So there's the first crack and the second crack. And so if I blindfolded you and I taught you to just listen for the crack, when that roast gets to the second crack, you can say, hey, that roast is done. It's time to go ahead and pull that roast out. So in a very general sense, if you roast coffee just to the second crack, you've completed the task. What we do in terms of how we adjust flavor profiles during the roasting process is roasting is about time, temperature, and airflow. And so we're adjusting those things accordingly. And however we adjust those things, we create a recipe of those things. So a recipe of temperatures at different times will yield a different flavor profile. And we lock all of that into our computer on our roaster, and that helps us to achieve consistency with every roast. So
That's
that's
awesome.
it in a nutshell.
But it's a science. It's an art and a science.
It absolutely is. One of the very first taglines that Phyllis had for PJ's was PJ's Coffee, where coffee is an art and not an afterthought.
Can we bring that back? Let's bring that back.
Yeah, it is. It is truly an art. It is an art. It's a craft. It's artisanship. Yeah, it is on every level, because you know what? There's customers that'll walk into your place and they can get a cappuccino, but three different baristas can make it, and that customer will, determine which of those baristas makes the best, and that's the one that they want to stick with. So, it's artisanship on all levels.
It's
It truly
awesome.
is.
Yeah, I
Yes.
love it. I
Yeah.
love that. How do you determine, you may have already told us this with the second crack scenario, but how do you determine when a batch is roasted to perfection?
So it really depends on the bean. And so and then it also depends on your target. So um, let's take dark roast for instance, right? Not every bean is made to be dark roasted. And the reason for that is because coffee beans have different density levels. And so, as you can imagine, dark roast, that bean is going to endure a higher temperature for a longer period of time. So, if you put a less dense bean in there, it's not as durable, to stand up to that. And so now you can really kind of get out of whack with those flavor profiles. Um, Brazil is one of those coffees that is known to not be so dense, and so you won't see Brazil roasted as an extremely dark roast a lot. But yeah, so starting out by knowing what elevation your beans came from, so that you can determine, because the higher the elevation, the more dense the beans are. That's going to tell you, hey, this is a good candidate for a dark roast. But then when you look at like an Ethiopian bean or these wonderful Colombian beans that we have with really, really good flavor characteristics, we want to find the sweet spot where it's a really nice roast, it has a really good body to it, but we're not going overboard where we're starting to mask some of those really, really nice flavor profiles. So if there's a sweetness or a fruitiness or something like that, we don't want it to be covered up in the roast profile. So that perfection of where to stop that roast, that's what takes some trial and error. And then you might hey, this one is good, but I think we can raise it, we can elevate it a little bit more, and you go back to the drawing board. And luckily, I don't have to do that 100 pounds at a time. I got a little roaster that does like 50 grams of coffee at a time.
Oh, that's
So
cool. Okay.
you can see I do a lot of trial and error.
So when you talk about like pulling notes out of beans, how do you know what notes are pulled? Is it like geographically, like soil, elevation? So all these beans have different
All of the
profile notes?
above. All of the
Okay.
above. If I didn't know any better, I would say you were reading up before you asked that question.
I've been on your tour, sir.
Yeah, so yeah, it absolutely does, man. Soil, it definitely starts with the soil. Different places have different characteristics. Right now, Colombia is having really fruity and sweet characteristics. Ethiopia, excuse me, Ethiopia is very citrusy typically. And so the mystery is, are you getting citrus from grapefruit? Are you getting citrus from lemon? Are you getting citrus from orange? So it's all of those things.
Again, back to the science and the art, right? That's I could talk about this forever.
Exactly.
Are you stuck in the digital dark age? If your website, social media, and emails are just a bunch of boring words and pictures, then the answer is yes. Video is the new king. Businesses using video marketing, like the ad you're watching right now, are seeing growth at 49% faster than businesses who just use boring text and pictures. It's simple. Videos smash through trust barriers like a wrecking ball through a piñata. Your customers can see, hear, and practically hug you through the screen, while your video list competition remains as approachable as a cactus. So what are you waiting for? Don't let your company be the wallflower at the digital dance. Click the link below and partner with MEM Media to join the video revolution and turn your business into a recognizable brand.
Let's talk, because when people come in and they're like, oh, what makes you different? We talk about small batch roasting, right? So we already talked about how some brands like I'm going to say burn, but I don't think that's the right word. Their coffee beans. We are sold. We're never going to do it. We're never going to change, I don't think. Like small batch roasting is where PJ's is at. So
Small batch roasting is where it's at. Small batch roasting is absolutely, kind of going back to your earlier question, what makes us different? We're doing about 1.9 million pounds of roasting, out of our facility. That's a number that when you walk into someone's typical roasting facility, you're going to probably see them roasting like 4 bags of coffee at a time, which is, basically a minimum batch of like 600 pounds at a time. We're maxing out at 300, which is two bags of coffee. And I don't want to see that change because the level of control, the smaller the batch, the more control you have over it. And we definitely, and so some people challenge us on that. They're like, well, you're doing, you got this machine and you're doing 300 pounds at a time. Well, anything south of that, I would consider it as like micro roasting, not small batch roasting. So there's another level, and obviously we're beyond that micro roasting. But yeah, small batch is where it is for sure.
okay, I love it. I was sold. That's why I have a PJ's coffee, right? Can you talk about, I thought this was so cool. I was at the conference, and now I'm blanking, but the women farmers, coffee bean farmers came to talk. Can you talk about PJ's Coffee and then our relationship with these farmers?
So now we're getting to where I love to talk about.
Open field.
No. So we've done things like work directly with farmers where, if we work directly with the farmer, that's something that's really considered like direct trade. And so through direct trade, you're working with the farmer where you're saying, listen, I'm going to buy it directly from you. You can have a direct influence, on what they do at that farm level and whatnot. And to me, it was like a great experience. But we wanted to be able to expand that, because when you're doing it that way, that's a big commitment. It's a big cash flow commitment because, when a farmer is moving a container of coffee, which is 275 bags yielding about 41,000 pounds, that's a big commitment on their part. So when they load that container onto a ship, you got to get the money moving at that point. So there's risk involved. What happens if that container falls off the ship? Because it does happen. Um, what happens if, I don't know, the container goes to the wrong place? There's all sorts of risk involved. So what we did was we went back to the drawing board and we got with our importing partners and we said, listen, we really want to make certain that we have a hand in what's going on at origin, where our coffee is coming from. We're buying enough coffee that it's important to us to know, A, that we're impacting lives, and B, how are we impacting lives? So our importing partners introduced us to these ladies, and they are phenomenal in terms of, first and foremost, for ladies to be owners of a company like theirs in a place like Honduras. That's not something that you normally, see. And so they're vertically integrated, and they're not just farmers. They are a co-op, and as a co-op, they're a group of farmers, and they're helping farmers. They're educating farmers. So they have a lot of coffee, that they have access to. So that helps make certain that the supply chain is there for us. But in terms of impacting lives, they're providing education, they're providing, medical care. They are very, very beneficial to their community. And, normally it's a thing of we need to go there and visit, which we will. I'll let you know when we go, get you in there. But but for them to make the big effort to come to the United States, and they participated in our conference, and I thought it was phenomenal for them to not only be able to introduce themselves and talk about themselves, but the interaction with our franchisees, they absolutely loved it. What it does is it brings value to them. And it's like, hey, listen, let's continue to do what we're doing and let's expound on that because we want to be with PJs for a long time. We want to go down this journey with PJs. So I see that as being very fruitful. And then what I took from that was everything that we're doing there, I wanted to do the same thing when I went to Colombia. And so visiting these farms, I may not get the coffee from this specific farm, but all of these farms are basically bringing their coffee to one central hub, one central location. And so to see these people's faces light up just because you took the time, there's thousands of farms. So when you show up at a farmer's property, I mean, like they're there welcoming you. They might want to feed you lunch, come and have, lunch with us, or, here's some, glasses of lemonade, just they'll give you something. It could be just anything, they make candy and things of that nature. And it's like, it really, really makes you realize that it is bigger than just give us the coffee, let us go do what we need to do. It's like we want to be able to tell your story, and bring you on that journey with us. And then as we're growing, for individuals like yourself, as part of our PJ's franchise family, we do have that responsibility to ensure that we're doing the right things, in terms of making certain that we're going to have the coffee. Really challenging times like right now, coffee is in the news every day, and it's kind of like, we're doing everything we can behind the scenes to ensure that, we can be there to absorb or to manage through any of those difficulties that come up.
Yeah, no one wants to lose their coffee.
No. It's so funny because with all of the crises and everything, I heard a stat, and everybody's so caught up on eggs. And so we're all talking about how expensive eggs are.
Lost my thing.
Lost
Lost my thought.
So
I got excited.
they said that, the stat is something like the number of people that eat eggs every day is something like 4%. It's like less than 10% of the population. The number of people who drink coffee every day is like 70% of
I believe it. Yeah.
So coffee is much more important than eggs are to a lot of people without them even realizing,
Yes. Yeah, you don't want uncaffeinated people running around.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because they may go from being uncaffeinated to very inebriated because they got to get that edge out some kind of way.
Right, yeah.
So we're
Bring
serving.
us the coffee.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Um, what's your favorite way to brew coffee at home?
Oh, uh, I have fallen in love with pour over. Um, Hot drip is probably the thing that I do the least. So I have a nice coffee bar set up that, my wife set me up really nicely. She gave me a really nice spot in the house. And so, it's like, hey, it's not a regular bar, it's a coffee bar, so I'll take that. And my options are pour over. Um, I have a pod brewer. I have the hot drip brewer, and I have my espresso machine. Um, the hot drip probably gets used. Well, obviously the pod brewer that's more like for R&D for me, so that gets very little use. But the espresso machine, that and the pour over are probably the two ways that I do it. So surprisingly enough, I used to like frown at an Americano, and I'm like, why would I want a watered down espresso? But I don't know. I like, so a little secret, I don't put espresso dolce in my espresso machine at home. My espresso machine has that Columbia Supremo in it, and it is phenomenal.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do that.
Yep, try it out.
I
Try
will.
it.
I will try to. That was. I'm glad you brought that up because my brain was gonna ask that question next. Is like, what beans do you have in there? So that's
Yep,
awesome.
yep, yep.
Um, what are some tasting notes coffee lovers should look for when drinking PJ's coffee?
So if you're on the dark roast side, so like espresso dolce, it has a tendency to have like these chocolatey mocha notes.
Mm-hmm. It's my
The
fave.
one thing I always try to explain to people with that is like, don't think of drinking it and tasting a Hershey bar.
Right. Yeah.
If you've never had the experience of tasting like pure chocolate, without any sugars or anything like that, that's what you kind of get there. Um, the I love the fruitiness, and sometimes the sweet tangy profile of our Columbia. I think our Maple Street and our Roast 35 are just very smooth experiences. One of the dark meat and one of the medium, lineup. Um, and then when it comes to our flavors, I think that, we kind of sometimes undersell ourselves with our flavors for one main reason. Not that, we're the only ones making the type of flavor that we, make or what have you, but we flavor whole bean coffee. And so by us doing so, that affords you guys to be able to use that coffee and grind it properly for however you're going to brew it. So often people take pre-ground coffee and they'll put it in their French presses, they'll put it in their hot drip, they'll use it, for whatever. And I always tell people like, if you go to Walmart, you can go to the small appliance aisle and you can buy pour over, cold brew, espresso machine, Keurig, hot drip, all of those things. And then you go over to the coffee aisle and everything is ground. And it's like, okay, so all of those bags of coffee are meant for hot drip. That's it. You do anything else with it, and you're not going to have a great experience. So, the fact that we do flavored whole bean, I think a lot of people really are not aware how rare that is. Cold brew. If you go to our competitors, they have a base cold brew, and if you want a hazelnut or French vanilla cold brew, they pump the syrup in it.
Not
Yeah,
ours.
not ours. Not ours. So that's one of our major differentiators.
Yeah, and it's you can taste the difference for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Another thing, it's a little off topic, but the way we do our cold brew, like we actually drip it in stores. Like we are
Yes,
grinding it. It doesn't
yeah,
come from a jug.
yeah,
Like it's not
yeah.
coming off a truck as far as
Right.
like in a jug. Like
Yeah.
there is a process that every barista has to know down to a
You
T,
know,
you know?
there's so many times that I've been approached by companies who specialize in making cold brew concentrate. You can imagine we have like roughly 200 PJ stores. You kind of would think that by now we would have like a PJ's branded, bottle of cold brew. I'll tell you the reason why we haven't. Not that we haven't been approached and not that we haven't looked into it. Number one, in order to make it shelf stable, they have to add things to it. So it's going to affect the taste of it. So that's the number one problem. The second issue is sort of a little known fact about coffee. The acidity in coffee is exposed, it's brought out by hot water. So when we do cold brew at PJ's and we're not using hot water, we keep that acidity retained in the coffee grinds. It doesn't come out in the extraction, which is why our cold brew is so smooth and doesn't have any acidity. So most of those companies that offer something like that, heating that product is part of the process that makes it, shelf stable without refrigeration. So why would we give that up, if we
I hope
have
we never do.
exactly.
You come see me if you want cold brew.
Yeah, exactly. So, but and so many people try it at home and they're like, I can't figure it out. No matter what, I cannot make it taste the same way at home that you guys make it at the store. And nine times out of 10, it's because they didn't grind it properly. You know, they know the recipe, but they don't understand, the whole purpose of that grind. So just come to your PJs. Let us do that for you.
Let us do the work,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Um, are there any exciting coffee trends or innovations that you know of in the coffee industry? What are you
So
seeing?
yeah, I'm kind of, there's, this whole light roast thing won't go away. Um, and listen, I know I might get in trouble for saying this, but I'm about as much of a purist as there is, and I consider myself very open-minded. But I just don't see that trend as being something that's going to really like hold a place in coffee. It is, there's the stigma that it does have more caffeine because obviously the lighter the roast, the more caffeine. But if you're drinking that coffee, you're not drinking that coffee for the flavor profile. It's not a very good flavor profile. So that one is, it seems to be hanging around. I was very surprised about Nitro. I thought that Nitro would have stayed around. It's still out there, but it didn't take off. And I think that that's really about people not really understanding, what Nitro, how Nitro and coffee actually, interact with each other and what it provides. But I gotta say though, I think that flavors and the way that coffee competes with the energy world is always going to be through espresso. So I think that espresso in some way, shape, or form, is always going to be a happening trend. As brands like ours become more innovative in how we create drinks. Hey, look, you said it, shaken espresso. That's like new terminology. That's the cool terminology in the coffee
Yeah.
world.
Oh,
So
it's so good though. If anyone asks me, I have two drinks that I love, and it's the Vienna cold cream,
okay,
but
okay,
I don't put the syrup pumps in it. I just do like a pack or two of stevia.
yeah, yeah.
And then the shaken espresso.
The bacon espresso, yeah.
But if it's cold here in St. Louis, I do an just a latte with oat
Yeah,
milk and some
yeah.
cinnamon on top. I don't do
Okay,
any flavors, anything.
okay.
'Cause, oh,
All
it's
right.
so
All
good.
right.
I have so many customers on
Anytime.
that now.
I'm just anytime hot drip, but because I'm drinking hot coffee all the time, because I'm tasting coffees, when I come into your store, I'm like a kid in the candy store. So I'm like, what sugars, what calories do I want? So, I'm like, "Hey, just give me the velvet ice, with I need the almond syrup in it because even when it's not wedding cake season, that's the closest I'm gonna get to wedding cake. And yeah, I want all of the whipped cream, and if there's even sprinkles, give it all to me because yeah, it's not what I have every day when I'm at the
Right.
roast.
Yeah, it's a treat. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
awesome. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who wants to appreciate coffee more deeply?
Yeah, simple enough. Um, get out and get a good coffee experience, and what I mean by that is, yeah, you can do that at home, but you have to understand what a good coffee experience is. So it's kind of like if every time you came to my restaurant, I served you a glass of red wine out of a box. Um, it's just a glass of red wine to you, you know, but you're not going to really appreciate a good glass of wine until you actually have a good glass of wine, and that's not always determined by what the price on the bottle is. So I think that my experience of doing so many coffee 101s, when I tell people, hey, now it's time for us to taste coffee, there's no sugars on the table, there's no creamers on the table. We're going to dive in and we're going to taste coffee. And the number of times I've converted people from putting anything in their coffee, you know, they go from putting everything in their coffee to putting nothing in their coffee. And, you know, it's kind of one of the funny things that we say in the coffee industry. The easiest way to drink bad coffee is to add milk and sugar to it. So, but if you get a really good coffee that has a really good quality, you're gonna feel like you're screwing it up if you throw something in there. And so I think that that's where it starts. And the reason I say get out and go experience a good cup of coffee is because once you get that and once you learn that, then you kind of become more educated because now you're going to dive in like what makes this so good, you know? And so the freshness, grind your own coffee, you know, grind it right before you brew it. Make sure, you know, don't brew it off of a $20 Mr. Coffee. You know, if you really enjoy coffee, go out and get you a decent, you know, coffee pot. And people say, well, what's the difference? And I'm like, you know, it's the heating element. You know, the target temperature for your water is between 195 and 205. And if you go buy a little $20, you know, coffee maker, it's just going to struggle to be able to maintain that temperature. So there's reasons. Some of us are just, you know, nerds about it, but there's reasons that some of us go out and spend, you know, some decent money on our brewing equipment. Um, so that's what I would say. If once you get that really good coffee experience, you don't want that all the time.
Agreed. And you might just buy into a PJ's Coffee
There
franchise.
you go. There you go. Yeah.
That's the story of my life, anyways. Where can people learn more about PJ's Coffee? I mean, I know we have a website. It's on all of our like franchise websites and stuff, but
Yeah.
is there can they learn in more depth? Is there like a if there's not, we should make one. Is there like a PJ's Coffee book or tell me
What
more?
we want to do is we've been talking about doing this. We've been talking about doing things like, you know, filming a coffee 101 so that, you know, people can go through it and, you know, some of the other things that we can do in terms of demo. Maybe we can take, you know, each one of our beverages and just kind of like dive in it, you know, with like a 5 or 10 minute thing and post that so our people can see. So yeah, we're working on those kinds of things, and I know for a fact that you know there's some inner workings like you know one of the young ladies in the on the operations team. We just did a podcast
I
together
saw
where
that, yeah.
and it's like, you know what? Those are the kind of things that we really need to dial into. And so you'll see more of that. But listen, I don't hide it. You know, my email address is felton.jones@ballardbrands.com.
Heard it here.
Email
Heard it
me
here.
questions, you know, I mean, reach out because, you know, I'm happy to say it's not that often that we get, you know, any types of problems or complaints, you know, from mail order. But one of the things that I love about our mail order is that we will get inquiries, you know, from people, and it could be anything like how much caffeine is in the product, or it could be, you know, one of the most common is Your Southern Pecan coffee has me so intrigued, but I have nut allergies, so I'm afraid to try it. Is it really a nut flavor? And I'm happy to say no. It's artificially flavored. So I get all of these inquiries. They just come in through our information line, and then internally they'll forward it to me. And I got to tell you, Jamie, I get pure joy. I don't want to just hit reply and just email. If they leave a phone number, I love to dial people up, and whenever they answer the phone, I'm like, "It's Felton Jones with PJ's Coffee," and they're like, "Oh man!" So I just yeah, it goes back to your question. What makes us different? What makes us stand out? And if a little effort like that for me means that much for somebody, then guess what? How many people are they going to go and tell? That happened. And I mean, listen, if you buy some Nestle Toll House cookies, out the grocery store, and you call that customer, service line, what are the chances that you're going to get the person that's, really behind the scenes, to give you a call back on that? So, I am very accessible. So yeah, make sure your podcast followers have that contact
We'll
information.
put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I promise you, I will receive every last one of those, and I will absolutely
That's
respond.
awesome. That's great. Last question, Felton. I want to know your 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plan. What do we see ourselves?
Man, 5 year, 10 years. So I would say that my 5 year plan, um, my 5 year plan. I'm 53 years old, and
You don't
this
look it.
January, so this past January made 30 years for me in the coffee industry. And thank you. And I want to be a part of the coffee industry as long as the coffee industry will have me. But I am on a personal mission, not just for PJs, but also for the industry, because all too often, most of our young people who do take an interest in coffee, they're working at your store behind your counter in the form of a barista. What I think that we need to do as an industry is we need to expose the industry to them and get them exposed, um, to the industry in terms of just understanding that anything from science to accounting, there's so many different careers in this industry that they could really make a good living at. They can travel, and there's opportunity. So when I see someone like myself, um, I don't see like a sort of a backfill. We don't really have a solid bench, if you will, of next generation of coffee professionals. So I've kind of been on that mission. So my 5 year plan, specific for me personally and for PJs, is hopefully in 5 years I'll have the next Felton, trained up, and then we're on this journey together. Maybe for another 5 years, where I could say, okay, let me pass the crown over, to you, and you're now that. And then, 15 years, I don't know, if I'm upright on 2 feet and still able to drink a good cup of coffee every morning, I'll take that for right now.
Oh, that's a win. Yeah, that's a win.
That's a win.
Awesome. Okay. Is there anything else that I did not ask or that you want to tell our listeners?
Um, there's, I would just say that one of the things that Phyllis Jordan, really made a big thing for us as a brand was, our involvement in our community. And what I see that makes me proud, and I know that it makes her proud because she lets me know about it. Um, you guys, our franchisees, what I always say is Jamie is PJ's in St. Louis, Missouri. You are PJ. And the reason I say that is because, your customers come in and they're attached to your location. They love the fact that you're there. So I can guarantee you, maybe not in your presence, but somewhere along the line, they're talking about how much they love PJs, and they talk with the owner when they go in, or the owner might actually be the one that makes their beverage or something like that. That means so much to people. But what our cafes have provided people in terms of just, being an anchor in the community is something that Phil has really built the company's, legacy on. And I'm happy to say that, listen, that's hard to capture in like strip malls and different locations. But in a lot of locations, that is the difference maker. And so when people walk in, I love being in one of our cafes when people walk in and they're speaking to, the people by name, and so you can tell that these people frequent it a lot. Um, we're going to continue to do coffee. We just want to do coffee the right way. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just doing coffee the right way. But if we can be that anchor and that place where you can come to and you feel at home, you feel that taste of New Orleans. That's kind of what we aim to be. So if we can be that for our individual communities, then we've accomplished what our founders set out for, and I'm so happy to say that I see that very, very regularly at all of our stores. So I just want our customers to know there's always going to be new trends. There's always going to be these new brands that emerge out there. But you know what? After you peel back the layers, see what's there. And we want to make certain that when you peel back those layers, we're just authentic through and
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
That's
Awesome.
basically it.
Felton, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
I
you,
could
Will.
talk to you all day.
This was so fun.
It was fun. Yeah.